Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Kim Strassel. I'm here with Bill McGurn. We're talking about this somewhat explosive Colorado State Supreme Court decision to strip Donald Trump's name from the 2024 primary ballot. Obviously, Donald Trump and his team was not very happy about this. Stephen Chung, a campaign spokesman, issued a statement saying that this was a completely flawed decision, vowing to swiftly file an appeal to the United States Supreme Court with a concurrent request for a stay. Trump's campaign, unsurprisingly, Bill, immediately rolled out with a fundraising email seeking contributions to fight to keep his name on the ballot, calling this a tyrannical ruling. And meanwhile, as you noted, Bill, even some of his rivals, most of his rivals came to his defense. Nikki Haley said in a town hall, quote, "The last thing we want is judges telling us who can and can't be on the ballot." Ron DeSantis tweeted that this had been based on spurious legal grounds and that SCOTUS should reverse. Another rival, Vivek Ramaswamy, never to be outdone, instantly said he would withdraw from the Colorado ballot if Chris Christie and Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley did so as well, urging them to do so. Even Chris Christie, as you noted, one of Trump's most outspoken rivals, criticized the ruling. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I do not believe Donald Trump should be prevented from being president of the United States by any court. I think he should be prevented from being president of the United States by the voters of this country. That's what I think. And I don't believe that it's good for our country if he's precluded from the ballot by a court. I think it's bad for the country if that happens. Now, the other reason I believe that is because, he will have had to incite insurrection, be a part of an insurrection, for him to be excluded. There's been no trial of him on that. And while I have very strong feelings about that, as you know, I also have very strong feelings in the fact that people in this country deserve to have a trial.
What do you think this means for Donald Trump's campaign and for the campaigns of his rivals? It strikes me every time, and we've talked about this a lot, the left does something that they claim is in the name of impeding his ability to win the election. It seems to turn around and actually help him.
Right. It's not clear to me that they're unhappy with the result, because I think they probably gambled that the best candidate for them to come up against is Donald Trump, even though he's looks like he's beating Biden in many of the battleground states now. They still think, and they're probably right, he is their best chance of winning in 2024. But people don't figure it out, and people don't realize how condescending and undemocratic it is. Chris Christie is absolutely right. He was a U.S. attorney, so he knows all about prosecutions. It's just the basics of law. First-year law student would be able to tell you this. And you mentioned the norms that have been overturned with an effort to get Trump are unbelievable. And the third factor in this, the press doesn't report it the way we're talking about it. They take it at face value. They're not outraged by it. Speaking of norms, it's kind of a side issue, but Hunter Biden and the subpoena, not only did he defy a congressional subpoena, he went to Capitol Hill, stood outside the building where he's supposed to be deposed, and basically, as James Comer said, gave the middle finger to Congress. Can you imagine if one of the Trump family did that? It'd be unbelievable. But they get away with this all the time because the press is one of the biggest allies, and all's fair in love, war, and fighting Donald Trump.
Yeah, it strikes me it just puts Trump's rivals in a really tough position, too, because as it is, most of them, Chris Christie aside, haven't been really aggressive about making distinctions between themselves and Trump. But it gets even harder when all this gets wrapped up in it, because to go after him on anything, even policy issues is to risk having voters thinking that you're attacking him alongside Democratic attacks. It's a weird place for them to be. Let's turn to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Colorado justices put their ruling on hold until January 4th on the expectation that this is going to go to the Supreme Court. It's hard to see how it won't, because there's any number of novel legal questions. This strikes me as, why did they take it up, and but which of these did they decide on? As even the Colorado justices acknowledged, they were traveling in uncharted territory. You could ask the question, what does it mean to have engaged in insurrection or rebellion? Or can Trump really be disqualified as an insurrectionist if he hasn't been convicted of that offense? Should it be up to the states to decide on Trump's eligibility? There's all kinds of legal questions. But the bigger thing to me, Bill, is kind of just how obnoxious it was for the Colorado Supreme Court to put the U.S. Supreme Court in this situation. The justices who wrote the majority, they tried to place us all in a very grandiose fashion, saying we don't reach these conclusions lightly, and we're so mindful of the magnitude and the weight of the issues before us, blah, blah, blah. The reality is, and by issuing this opinion, they understood they were putting the U.S. Supreme Court in an absolutely terrible place where it once again has to wade into a political battle, which it's already had to do a number of times because of these left-wing lawsuits. It had to rule on a question regarding the New York grand jury probe. It declined to hear Trump's appeal of a court decision allowing the January 6th committee in the House to review certain records. And I would note, Bill, it's largely ruled against Trump in these fights. But here's the betting. Nobody remembers any of that if it now takes this case, which it has to, and if it overturns it, which it likely will because it's such a flawed case. But what does this do to the court, Bill? And, is there any way for it to avoid this? And what would be the best outcome here?
I think that, as I say, the best outcome would be simple. I don't think they have to get into all details. A simple, clear ruling that the whole thing is farce, that there's no legal justification for this case. And I would like it to be unanimous. We see Republicans willingly give their votes to anti-Trump rulings. I'm not sure we have seen Democratic-appointed justices that are willing to do the same thing on the other side. And so I think it's as much a test of whether there are going to be completely partisan divisions on the Supreme Court, or whether there'll be some people interested in at least agreeing on the rules of the game, which is, after all, one of the most important. They no doubt didn't appreciate this case coming to them, but that's what they paid for. They have to give a ruling.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would look to see Chief Justice John Roberts. As I noted, there were all those different kind of legal questions up for grabs there. And I would wager he may try to find the one or two that could, in fact, get a pretty resounding and unanimous decision, if that's possible. So thank you, Bill. Thanks for all those insights. We thank our listeners. We want to remind you we are here every weekday. We'll be back tomorrow. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. And please hit that subscribe button if you like the show.